Uh, Hello everyone, my name is Tushar and I'm going to present our work on the roots and prevention of stigmatization of caregivers of children with autism in urban Bangladesh. This is a joint collaboration between Dipto, Priyank, Munirul, Iqbal, Ishtiaque, and myself from various North American universities, and Iffat and Tanjir from Bangladesh. And I guess I'll start with the introduction. Stigma impacts the lives of victims in various ways, including hindered opportunities, increased financial burdens, and discrimination in multiple domains. Specifically, stigmas around mental illness and neurodevelopmental disorders such as autism spectrum disorder are prominent areas of concern for their damaging impacts on the affected population. This is important because there are more than 7.5 million people worldwide with autism, and many of them suffer from autism stigma. The prevalence and severity of stigma towards autism and mental disorders in many countries in the global south, including Bangladesh, are considerable. However, little research has been conducted towards reducing stigma to autism and mental disorders. Stigma of mental disorders is predominantly fought through raising individual awareness, which leaves the root causes unaddressed. Also, there is a gap in research in the global south regarding the stigma of autism. The definition of stigma underwent a dramatic transformation in the past few decades. Kaufman's definition considers stigma as a person's attribute and places the root of stigma in the visual or behavioral differences between a stigmatized person and others. However, Lincoln Fallon addresses this limitation and shifts the definition from victim's attribute to a social condition. They argued that the stigma works as a label that is applied to some human traits to reflect and reproduce existing power relations in society. Thus, stigma can work as a tool of discrimination for powerful people to identify, monitor, and control certain less privileged groups. Extending this concept to mental disorder stigma, Lincoln Fallon stated that the primary reason for which people stigmatize the mental ill is to maintain social norms through direct and indirect measures that produce inequality for marginalized groups. Stigma towards mental illness generated in Europe and later transferred to the Indian subcontinent. Following the decline of leprosy in Western Europe during the early modern period, people with mental illnesses started to be detained in larger houses that used to hold lepers. Thus, the confusion and fear attached to the leper transferred to people with mental issues. They began to be seen as carriers of diseases and started being stigmatized. Their situation was worsened by the ruling elite's view of idleness as dangerous. Due to mental patients' lack of capacity for psychological reasoning, the ruling class abrogated the civil responsibilities of them and justified the control, detention, and surveillance of them. The European psychiatry system, through colonial rule, heavily influenced how mental illness was viewed in the Indian subcontinent. Contrary to previous subcontinental tradition, the British government developed mental asylums to exert more social control and surveillance. The local community gradually embraced the concept and the associated moral values during the long colonial rule and started admitting locals into these asylums. Ernst remarked that the development of mental asylums in British India is a less conspicuous form of social control. Bangladesh, which only gained its independence in 1971, suffered historically from the same colonial influence regarding how mental illness is perceived and shunned. Prior studies have looked into stigma concerning HIV/AIDS, physical and mental disabilities, sex workers, and education, among others. These studies emphasize this designing against stigma encompasses understanding and tackling challenges with respect to the population, social practices, and identity. Designing against stigma related to autism similarly would require addressing the social norms that play an active role in producing and intensifying stigma. Autism stigma is under studies in ICTD. Most of the existing research emphasizes on educating the people and raising awareness about autism and mental illness stigma. Link et al. Suggests changing societal concepts and involving the collective action of people to alter power differential. Stigmatizers' inclination may also be changed by altering their capacity to exercise power. Scholars have also discussed the movement against HIV stigma in Brazil to show the importance of social empowerment in assuring citizens' rights in stigmatizing context. They argued that stigma against HIV/AIDS is partially redressed by government initiatives through transforming the experience of HIV in society from fatal and incurable to chronic and manageable, creating a bridge between the extreme ends of power through a broad social movement transfer of the power relationships and changed stigmatizing perceptions in Brazil. Okay, so we're moving into our fieldwork right now. So the objective of, we conducted interviews and focus group discussion as well as participatory design workshops. The objective of interviews of our study was to understand the nature and severity of autism stigma in urban Bangladesh. The objective of design workshops was to get design ideas that can help combat stigma in the aforementioned context. To recruit the participants, we used the snowball sampling method. 29 pairs and 9 teachers in total participated in our study from 5 different special needs schools in Dhaka, which is the capital of Bangladesh. We also consulted 2 religious leaders. Each parent participant in our study had an offspring with autism. All but one of the offspring were under 18 years of age. Parents were from a range of socioeconomic and professional background. All but one of the researchers were born and brought up in Bangladesh and closely tied to the local culture. Some of us also had autistic relatives and considered us part of the community. Interviews, discussion, and field notes were transcribed, anonymized, translated in English, and quoted based on grammar theory. And these are just the 2 pictures from 2 of the 5 schools. Our fieldwork showed that stigma in the family is manifested in 2 ways. Number 1, through the display of stigmatization and discrimination to people with autism. And number 2, through the display of caregivers. Our study shows that members of immediate and extended family, close and distant relatives, and friends and acquaintances often display harsh, stigmatizing attitudes towards people with autism. Mothers of children with autism reported that fathers were often not willing to take any responsibilities for the child and considered them a burden on their family life, sometimes by citing religious and cultural sayings. Not receiving support from their husbands in raising a child with autism was very frustrating for these mothers. Grandparents were often very harsh to their grandchildren with autism. They are often not allowed to take part in family events and gatherings because of the rules set by grandparents. Additionally, other relatives also often looked down upon the condition of these children. They kept being told how worthless, quote unquote, worthless they are. These children are often not invited and not allowed to play with cousins, often. We found stigmatizing behaviors from the school administration, including an unwillingness to admit a special child and lack of investment in training teachers, even in special schools. Teachers often have misconceptions about the nature of autism and are thus unwilling to teach such children. Additionally, children are stigmatized by their classmates and their parents. In public places, caregivers face stigmatizing attitudes from people. Half of our participants received harsh treatment due to the abnormal behavior of people with autism. Moreover, our participants saw people forbid their children from interacting with children with autism during playtime for fear of other children, quote unquote, catching the condition. Lastly, some healthcare workers also showed stigmatizing thoughts and attitudes toward these marginalized groups. Okay, now we're moving into the roots that we found through a study. Our study showed that fathers, relatives, and acquaintances, and even strangers in public places engage in blaming mothers of children with autism for the neurodevelopmental condition. Female participants shared their experience of being criticized in various situations, feeling that they were held responsible for any mistake or annoyance caused by their children. Most participants agreed that this behavior was rooted in misogynistic beliefs held by many in the Bangladeshi society. Stigma associated with economic risk comes from financial insecurity and negligence from the government. People with autism are perceived to have low chances of generating income, and parents thus feel burdened about this group of people, their children. We also found the policies in both government and private institutions restricted opportunities for people with autism. This actually falls under the definition of structural stigma. Most of our participants faced rumors associated with religious beliefs and practices that often had very little to do with authentic religious teachings. Instead, those had roots in long-standing cultural practices. Some other stigmatizing beliefs stems from non-religious perceptions, which attempted to present causal relationships among autism and other factors in a pseudo-scientific manner without proof. Okay, the objective of the 2 participatory workshops that we had was to explore the design of possible interventions. All participants concurred that their main challenge was lack of power. We encouraged them to come up with ideas that might give them more power to fight stigma, driving the conversation toward a design level discussion. Participants came up with 3 groups of ideas. First, the replacement of the current ID card, which does not entail any special provisions. Our participants envisioned, the picture at the bottom is the current ID card. Our participants envisioned a new digital ID card for obtaining various special treatments, including allotment of sufficient monthly income, special rates in vehicles, recognition as special status holder in the court of law, and expedited service in government offices. A digital card would also help ensure expedited services and foolproof authentication of their identity. Participants emphasized that through these privileges, people with autism would have more agency in their daily lives. that would enable them to become less dependent on others. In Bangladesh, a faster rate of service equates additional prestige, leading to higher self-esteem and elevated social status, and this should help with alleviating stigma. Another idea was creating a new online platform informed by insights from people with autism and their families. This platform should be accessible and have a discussion forum for caregivers. The forum could be used to identify specific problem areas and would help decrease the dependency of these marginalized groups on others. Parents acknowledge that technology alone is not sufficient and would require an integrated approach, including awareness campaigns, addition to textbooks, and infrastructural changes. Lastly, some parents proposed a focus on religion to combat stigma, since the religious figures are widely respected and play a crucial role in the fight against stigma. Okay, so drawing from our fieldwork, we propose design frameworks to combat autism stigma. We believe that the feminist design framework offers an opportunity to empower mothers of children with autism. This will require input from and representation of these marginalized groups in the design process, creating inclusive environments and encouraging manufacturers to indicate if their products are autism friendly. We argue that such an initiative will contribute to reducing power imbalance and stigma. Furthermore, the misogyny behind autism stigma can also be addressed through this framework implemented with mothers. We also believe that adversarial design can be used to design critical initiatives such as a public database to chronicle and demonstrate people who engage in stigmatizing behavior. Similarly, the online platform can be used to unite and fight against stigma within local communities. We believe these suggestions are in line with the proposal by Linkat Phelan of changing societal conceptions and involving the collective action of people to alter power differentials, which obviously should also involve government policy and facilities from the government. To tackle the misrepresentation of Islamic teachings for stigmatization, we propose the involvement of religious leaders in local communities. We actually draw inspiration from the role of organized religion and religious beliefs and institutions in fighting the stigma of HIV/AIDS in Brazil, where 1 in 5 organizations involved in this process, involved in HIV programming, is now faith-based. Now this is my last slide. Our research clearly demonstrated that ICTD research should focus more on finding ways stigmatized populations and monitor, surveil, control, and judged, both online and offline. We also argue that ICTD research should develop political enclaves for victims to protect themselves and grow their political voice, and we draw inspiration from Foucault here. This realization also strengthens the post-colonial computing's call for focusing on local creativity and collaboration. Our data demonstrates how parents wanted informational communal support that are local and is easily accessible. They also demanded that the online platform be a venue for communication, collaboration, and unity against stigma. By analyzing these requirements, we argue that any sustainable design against stigma in a post-colonial context needs to be grounded in local communal resistance. That's all for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tushar, for the wonderful talk. Any questions?
Okay. Any questions? I'm open to questions.
I thought I saw a raised hand.
Please go ahead. Okay, I will ask a question till others are warming up. So Tushar, like, are there similar work in the Indian context and what are the similarities and differences that you know of, like how much your work is generalizable? Because I think there are many similarities, but are there any major differences?
With the other work that has been performed in, like, especially in the Indian subcontinent?
In India or like the neighboring countries?
So definitely there has been a lot of work on stigma. Like, if you talk about stigma in general, stigma against mental illnesses or mental conditions, or specifically stigma against autism. There has been a lot of work. So the main difference that I want to focus is that most of them focused on an approach that we like to call education and awareness approach. So basically, all this most of this work, they suggest only making the general people aware, making the general public aware of how these marginalized groups of people are not something to be shunned, to be omitted or something. But as I showed, like drawing from research, only this approach alone would not be sufficient, because we need to also address the power differentials. Because as you can see on the definition of Lincoln Felon, stigma always has a very important component where there is a power difference between two groups of people. So that was our focus.
Jayid had a question.
Yeah, hi. I really liked your talk as well as the way that you've contextualized this.
Thank you.
In India, we saw something very interesting around about 10 years ago. There was a slew of films and television shows which had a key character with autism. And I'm wondering whether you've seen or considered the possibility of celebrities or public figures getting involved in the destigmatization process, whether it's through a gaze or however, but just getting people to talk about it. Is that something you've seen?
Yeah, definitely. There has also already been work on this. For example, there's a paper by Khatri et al. That we mentioned in a paper, who argue for leveraging celebrity star power on Twitter to help educate and raise awareness about autism stigma in India specifically. Yeah, so there has been similar work, but not that many focusing on autism and not that many focusing on Global South in general. So that is one key area, because we are calling this area under study specifically on the Global South and related to autism. There's been like lots of research in high-income countries and like related to other mental illnesses. So that is one point. And the second point is that, again, if you're leveraging the power of the celebrity, you're only making people aware, right? So that is an educational or awareness approach. So that would not directly contribute to leveraging removing the power differentials. So what I suggest here in my presentation is a joint approach. If you see this, I guess, diagram. So we have this awareness and infrastructure changes as the third component, but the first two components directly relate to government support, intervention, and making people aware. So one very important component, I think, is like collaboration within these marginalized groups. So for example, you have people, you have caregivers whose children go into the same school, but they probably don't know each other. But they are probably in the same neighborhood, but they don't know each other. We propose that if they knew each other, they could collaborate and they could make a force. This will give them some power to leverage compared to what they have. They have nothing right now. If they could collaborate, if they could know each other, they could grow their voice, they could raise their voice and demand something from the government and in the society.
I can ask a follow-up if there's time, or somebody else has one. Go for it.
Like a shot. Go ahead, Jajit. Yeah.
Yeah. So the associated risk with this, and I don't know if you've seen this in disability studies, there's this whole nothing about us without us. And even in the autism related space, there's been a lot of tension between organizations like Autism Speaks, which are representations of parents and how they think about autism being projected on the children themselves, versus groups which are people themselves who experience autism in their lives speaking about it. One concern in a Global South setting is, how do you bring about that balance when there isn't that empowerment, and you end up doing these things such as labeling people?
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, well, like whatever we do, like even in terms of like government approaches, like if you think about the special ID card that that the parents actually proposed, that the government should take some initiative to provide, even that should have some balances. I guess check and balance is very important in any context. Like you cannot give any group of power an unlimited amount of an unlimited amount of power, right? So there are the clashes, and I think there could be like some like natural mechanism even to bring up some balance, because this marginalized group is small, like, right? So they don't have that many members compared to the general population, and I guess this is why we're advocating that they need some added power to right the imbalance of power between these two groups, the general population and the marginalized population. So I guess that could be one approach.
Okay, yeah, so we are running out of time. So thanks again, Tushar.